From fitness routines to mental resilience, navigating personal goals to tackling burnout, we all need a little help with the tricky work of being human. Well, that is where the Life Kit podcast from NPR comes in. If you're looking to move with more intention or just need some thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. This is much more than just a show that gives you practical advice. It gives you the support and the thinking you need to navigate some of life's trickiest decisions. For instance, we're headed into the fall. Those of us with kids or those of us in school are going back to school. This can be a pretty tricky time. Well, Life Kit has a number of episodes on how to support your kids, from setting up routines to dealing with smartphones to just trying to emotionally connect with them as they go through the tricky stuff that is being a kid and a teenager. And look, I listened to all these episodes. None of them provide a one-stop miracle cure to all of life's problems. That's not how life works. But when I listen to Life Kit, I feel more informed, more assured in my decisions, a little closer to having some of the tricky things figured out. As a parent, that's basically all I could ask for. That's not to say there aren't some episodes that are really helpful at a practical level. For instance, there's a great recent episode with tips for planning a vacation, and that one was quite useful. I think I saved myself a decent chunk of change after listening to it. So if you need help tackling common issues like relationships, finance, parenting, your career, and something that gives you a game plan that you can implement right away, listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.
This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, September 2001, a nationwide advertising campaign begins for the Hummer H1, the giant truck that was originally designed for U.S. military use and then became synonymous somehow with both war zones and hip-hop videos throughout the 1990s. And now, going into the 2000s, Hummer had been acquired by General Motors, and it was to become one of the most iconic cars of the early 2000s, a time when the cars were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more masculine and tougher, and the U.S. public was a little more fixated on military gear and military gear from abroad showing up on American streets. So, here to discuss the rise of the Hummer and what it meant, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley, who both still own their Hummers. It's crazy, yeah, but the lease is still going.
Yeah, no, they keep trying to give me like a more fuel efficient one. And I was like, no, I like getting my 8 miles to a gallon.
Okay.
I'm like so hyped for this episode because the Hummer, like I feel like, I have music that's like the soundtrack to your life or whatever. When I was high school, college, the Hummer was everything, and it had to be yellow.
Do you pin it to a particular rapper or celebrity?
I do. I feel like, Nelly. I feel like
Ja Rule.
There's certain songs that I think of that, I have all this like nostalgia for being in the club and like thinking of Hummers, and that was like, it was just everything.
It was there was always the moment 20 minutes into MTV Cribs where someone goes in the garage and there's a Hummer there.
And there's a Hummer.
Yellow.
There's a Hummer.
Yeah.
Yes.
A Hummer.
Did you see them in the wild though, or was it just a thing in music videos?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And
it's kind of crazy. In high school, I mean, if you were that kid, like, where you had, what is that show on MTV where they had the Sweet 16 parties?
Oh, yeah.
The Hummer
Sweet 16.
or something. Yeah, for their birthday. And that was like the ultimate status symbol of like, you've made it.
Yeah.
Because they were so expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing.
Expensive.
They were so big and obvious and expensive. Like they were like that flashy, conspicuous consumption vehicle of the late 90s and 2000s.
We'll get into this for sure, but the other thing that struck me when I saw the rise of the Hummer in the 90s was also like that they were kind of willfully impractical, you know? And an interesting thing is we're pinning this to when General Motors takes over the Hummer. And, you know, I think one of the stories there is like in the 2000s, they try successfully and then maybe less successfully to kind of turn it into another luxury SUV kind of thing. But I think in the 90s, when the Hummer first showed up, the sort of appeal was like, this came straight out of the desert where it was like purely utilitarian for the military, has none of the creature comforts of a car or an SUV. And I just remember at the time, you know, being turned off by just kind of like what it was signaling, but also just being like, man, people are like paying all this money for a car that's probably like really annoying to drive, you know, obviously fuel efficient, but like kind of ugly in my opinion. And so it was just this weird disconnect.
It's the 5-inch stiletto of cars.
Right.
Yes!
Right?
Yes,
Completely impractical. It actually makes it harder to do the thing that you need to do.
Walk.
But it's such a status symbol.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's such actually like a virility and sex symbol as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go through the history a little bit. I mean, it's developed throughout the 80s. And, you know, the AM General Corporation receives a contract in 1983 for 55 high mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicles. So HMMWV, Humvee becomes the name for it. Then that gets turned into Hummer. And then, you know, into the 90s, late 80s and into the early 90s, it's hard to overstate how much the Gulf War has a role in this, because these vehicles are being used for military purposes. They can go over sand dunes and you can mount guns on them, and they're, they're retrofitted to be bulletproof. But they're on TV all the time. And, you know, the Gulf Wars were the first cable news wars, and the images from those really get seared into the American public. And so they kind of become familiar with these vehicles. And then it is Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people, who is kind of the Pied Piper of the Humvee for the American public, huh?
That's a great way to describe him, because he is obsessed with the Humvee, and he is trying to figure out how to get himself one of these. Because it is something like, you know, he was one of those enormous action stars of the 1980s and 1990s, and enormous not just in terms of his fame, but like he's a big guy. He's got these huge muscles, and here's this vehicle who actually kind of fits him in a way. And so he becomes the advocate for trying to get this as a crossover into the civilian space. And that's what he's trying to do. And after the Gulf War is over, like the U.S. is in a period of demilitarization after the Cold War. And so AM General Corps is also trying to find a place to offload all of these Humvees. So I think that there is a sense that like there's a possibility that we can take this basic structure and reformat it a bit for the civilian marketplace.
Yeah, and apparently he's one of the first people to order or buy one of these vehicles. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're in the marketing room, you want someone like Schwarzenegger, you know, driving around in your car and making it sort of the coolest thing out there.
And this is basically the story of the Jeep, right? Like the Jeep had been sort of the standard issue vehicle of World War II. And after the war is over, it makes the crossover into civilian life as the Jeep. And it becomes like the thing that's defining the SUV category in the early 90s. So the Humvee, turned into the Hummer, is going to become like the competitor for the Jeep. And they basically have the same backstory, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, the Jeep is a good analogy, and I think the Jeep does have a kind of utilitarian appeal and a little militaristic appeal. I mean, obviously I wasn't around when the Jeep was the go-to military vehicle, but I just also...
So you're not actually 100 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm Benjamin Buttoning in every episode, but, you know, I just also think that the appeal and also just like a capacity to see militarization on American streets in this era is like it taps into that larger story. And this is the era when like local jurisdictions are like buying tanks, you know, and police are outfitting themselves in this way. And so it's just this idea that like a military vehicle would be going down a civilian, a normal street. It just feels more normal.
But it's not just, to me, when I think of the Jeep, I don't think of just like a military industrial complex. I also think of like colonialism and like out of Africa and people like in safari driving these Jeeps around. Like it has this very colonial vibe to it that is just I mean, you're in the outback, you're in sort of like some sort of open range. That's the kind of vehicle that you would have, or at least the vehicle that I think of when I'm thinking of that.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Robin from PRX. There's a really special new show that I think you'd really enjoy. It's called The Selects Podcast, and it's a twice-monthly show that brings you sonic gems from the depths of web archives, radio streams, and early podcasts. Their goal is to preserve work, some of the best audio ever made, from getting lost to defunct podcast feeds, defunded programs, and just time. Listening helps give these works a new life. A lot of the pieces were recommended by some of the most talented audio creators today as having been the piece that inspired them to get into audio, so you know they're going to be pretty consistently excellent. Check out the Selects Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Please listen closely.
If it ain't got those hands, man,
You don't have to be gay to listen.
If it ain't got that stretch, if it ain't got those eyes.
This morning for breakfast, I had a toasted everything bagel with eggs and cheese and...
Well, folks, it happened. It's here. Fall is in full swing, and it is the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. I am turning to Quince for all my fall staples that actually last. You've heard me talk about Quince on this show. You've heard me talk a lot about linen. Linen time, though, is over. It is now time for wool, denim, and even, dare I say, cashmere. Look, I never thought cashmere would be part of my life, but with Quince, there are actually pieces like cashmere sweaters and scarves and hoodies that are really nice and affordable. A 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater from $50. There's washable silk tops and skirts, perfectly tailored denim, all at prices that continue to blow me away. So keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. So let's advance this from the kind of 90s post-Gulf War where there are Hummers on the street and they mostly still look kind of exactly like the ones that were, maybe the very same ones that months before were in Operation Desert Storm or whatever. And GM takes over first the marketing and then eventually just fully takes over the Hummer. It's sort of faced with this dilemma of how do we position this thing? It is a little impractical. It doesn't have the creature comforts. And they hit on a kind of market and a story that is incredibly resonant to where we are right now. So where, what do they realize about the Hummer's appeal?
I mean, they target men and they say this is a way to become a man again. So they come across this idea that there's this whole kind of underserved market of men who want their consumption to reflect who they are as individuals and who also want it to reflect their masculinity. And that actually becomes the tagline, reclaim your masculinity, which is such a bomb to drop in the 1990s and 2000s. Yeah. Gender stuff, because gender stuff is so weird in this era. It's in part because you finally have a rising visibility of gay men in the culture. You have the rise of the idea of metrosexual right around this time. And in response to this, and then rising feminism, and there are more women in the workplace. And so in the midst of all of this, you have this car and this ad campaign that's like, remember when men were men? Buy this car and you can be a man again. Ugh, it's on the nose.
It's a lot also though because the car is it is not very functional. I mean, it's so big you can't really even park it in your garage. It's massive. I work
People do have to rebuild their garages for this. I remember this from the 90s.
Insane. Yeah. And try backing up in that thing. You know, if you've got little kids, it could be dangerous. I mean, there are elements of this car that are absolutely impractical. Absolutely impractical. And yet that is also part of the appeal, is that you want to drive in something that feels unattainable to others.
But also that the world has to accommodate me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm here. I'm going to park wherever I want.
Move over.
I'm going to take up 2 spots, move over, which I think is a version of masculinity that is at the heart of all of this. So it's not just reclaim your masculinity, but it's like impose your masculinity in some ways, with through driving a car like this that puts a lot of people out, and it's not. Yeah, it doesn't fit in. It doesn't play nice with the rest of the roads. That said, like there is also this interesting dynamic in the 2000s that GM also realizes, like, well, we should put some creature comforts into this thing, and they turn it into the H1 and the H2. And I remember seeing those cars, and then the sort of larger luxury SUV market is exploding. But I remember seeing those cars softening in an interesting way as they're marketing them, still leaning into the masculinity, but it wasn't the just pure military vehicle of even 5-10 years earlier in the 90s as GM starts to kind of market it. We obviously we're hooking this to September 2001. It's not a September 11th related thing, but obviously in the wake of September 11th, there's a lot of rally around the flag. Yeah, for sure. So I'm sure a lot of people in the last few months of September of 2001 went out and bought Hummers as a kind of act of patriotism and kind of American might. On the masculinity angle, the tagline was "Reclaim your masculinity," or maybe "Restore your masculinity." In some ads, there was a 2006 Hummer ad that ran where it's a TV ad and it shows a guy buying tofu and vegetables at a grocery store, and then he looks over his shoulder and there's a guy buying pounds and pounds of red meat, and then he gets all sheepish and embarrassed, and he looks over and there's a magazine with a Hummer ad on the back, and he rushes out to the dealership and buys a Hummer in order to tip the scales back towards the red meat. But yeah.
Guys, is it gay to eat a vegetable?
Maybe. I mean, Joe Rogan is asking that question
every day. He actually only eats meat, which is horrifying. But that idea, this is the essence of this concept of toxic masculinity and why it's so damaging for men. You should be able to eat a salad and not have to buy a Hummer afterwards. Really. Your penis is fine. It's fine. And in fact, it might work better if you had a vegetable every once in a while. Yeah. But it's just, this is what I love about gender culture in the 90s and 2000s is there's nothing subtle about it.
Yeah.
No.
Right? It just, the text is rich, but the text is not hidden.
No.
It's right there. There's no subtext.
But can I just say that okay, so they have another ad, a print ad campaign that feels straight out of something that John Hamm would say in Mad Men or whatever, where the campaign ad is, sometimes you find yourself in the middle of nowhere. And sometimes in the middle of nowhere, you find yourself. And I'm like, yes, give me that Hummer.
I love that. Actually, it almost sold me on that one.
But that taps in a little bit more into the kind of traditional SUV idea of exploration and being ready to go wherever. And of course, we haven't pointed out that 98% of Hummer owners and 98% of massive SUV owners never take it off-road whatsoever and never use it for what it's actually kind of could be designed to
Soccer
use.
But that's is where they're going.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, and to that point too, I mean, it's really fascinating how it becomes a family vehicle as well. And you see, I mean, I remember images of very small, very small white women in Lululemon, getting out of this massive Hummer, and you're just do we need this? Do you need this? But that's just part of the larger sort of, enormous
cool
truck
aesthetic.
Yes.
And that's just part of the larger SUV story.
Yes, SUVs and I would say trucks. I put them in the same category as your Ford F-150 or as your, there are certain cars that we just associate with certain ideas or identities, and that the Hummer, the pickup truck, I mean, they all represent hyper masculinity in ways that that we don't always think of with other cars. I thought the same thing when around the same time the Chrysler 300 came out, and everyone called it like a gangster car. It looked like a car that drug dealers use, but like the Black community was all over that. Like absolutely loved the aesthetic of that Chrysler 300. And it's like there are narratives. Cars have narratives.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I feel like we can't leave without talking about a different commercial, though. The 2006 Super Bowl commercial for the Hummer. I don't know if people will remember this, but I just rewatched it. This commercial is amazing. It's like, who is it? It's like Godzilla and then like a Robo guy.
Yeah.
And they like meet and they fall in love. And then it like goes through their courtship, and then like Godzilla is pregnant, and then Godzilla gives birth to a Hummer. Which is the trippiest, like, I'm sorry, your car came from Godzilla's vagina? Like, this is such a weird message.
I mean, Transformers really opened up a whole kind of appetite for weird cross robot human. And I would mark maybe 2006 as the sort of high point or the kind of last hurrah in many ways for the Hummer. I mean, I think in the wake of that, you know, again, I think the like souring over the Iraq War probably has a big, there's a vibe shift there. And certainly environmentalism and an understanding about fuel efficiency. Electric cars are starting to come onto the scene. And the Hummer kind of like, I would say, in the late 2000s into the 2010s. And in part, I would say because of the tricky dance GM was trying to do, which is to say, this is both for you red meat eating men out there and for the suburban mom out there, you know. I don't know, it just kind of loses its way a little bit and certainly disappears off the road. But all of these vibes that we were discussing about, all this conversation about masculinity is obviously back in a big way right now. And I would say the Cybertruck is in many ways kind of the...
You mean the refrigerator on four wheels? Because that's what it looks like.
Does it look like
a refrigerator on four wheels.
Or dumpster, yeah.
But, you know, that is clearly hitting, and its marketing has done the same thing. I mean, it's clearly trying to hit all the same notes. And then in 2020, I think reading the kind of where the winds were shifting, General Motors tried to revive the Hummer nameplate, though interestingly enough, tried to do an electric vehicle version of it. Which, again, you know, it's worth pointing out that not that long ago, electric vehicles and the sort of Muskian bro thing weren't that far apart, you know? And so, I don't know. It's all very complicated.
Yeah, it is.
Men are weird.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, gender is weird.
Gender is weird. It's so funny because my dad is from Detroit and big car guy, and he like abhorred electric cars because he was like, you can't hear them, they don't make a sound. He wants that vroom when you turn it on. He wants that, like, you know, big. So he always drove like big pickup trucks and all that stuff, and now he drives a Kia, and I think it's so funny. I'm like, what changed? And he was like, well, it's more gas efficient, it's this, it's that, and he likes electric cars now. So go figure. But you know, taste.
They also make
growing and evolving.
They also make electric cars that fake those noises because
I was like, there's a really simple fix for this.
And there's like electric cars that are like the pedal will like shake a little bit to give it that feel, and I understand that appeal. So yeah. All right, well, this was really fascinating. I'm glad we got to this, and I don't know, maybe we'll start seeing more Hummers out there although I think the vibe's already switching back again. I mean, it's just like a very quick, these sort of cultural swings happen much faster, I think, than like car manufacturers can plan their rollouts, and so they're probably just like as turned around as everyone else.
Stop changing your minds,
Yeah, exactly. All right, Nicole Heimer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Radiotopia.